And let's get
Like now.
like no, we haven't had any problems at all. I think this is. I don't know what basis number this is, but it's on my picture. Elana Freeland, welcome to the Basis Project. It's absolutely fantastic to see you finally, and we won't refer to any previous conversations we've had some moments ago, as we say. I got a book of yours, and it's really, really great books. These books that you've been doing, and the reason why this is music to my ears is I've been doing the Basis Project since 1994, and it's about transhumanization and not necessarily aliens. It's about making us into something else under the control by some other something else. And a lot of the stuff that you have in your books, you are able to articulate to a much wider audience. And I've had people actually read sections of your book to me about things, and it's music to my ears because I can read things and see things, but maybe they're hidden away on an interview I've been doing. I've started this in 1984, where the British found out, somebody found out, this guy's father found that the Germans had a special lab and they were making strange looking humans, and they had other things going on without going too far in it. But basically, if anybody saw them walking down the street, we'd think they were an alien. And maybe they were cross transmutating humans into aliens. And maybe that's their plan right now. So, what got you into this business? And tell us all about your books. I know you got a presentation to give us. So set the scene, Elena. And who are you? And why should we listen to a word you say?
'Cause it doesn't count that I've been at this for almost 20 years, right?
Well, tell us all about it.
The first, um, the first thing I usually talk about is how I met Clifford Carnicom, the independent scientist who has done the lion's share of work on this problem of geoengineering since it would be 1999. I met him in approximately 2005 at a breakfast. Given that I like to put my nose into any technology to figure out what's going on today, I feel that when you incarnate on planet Earth as a human being, that one of your major jobs eventually is to figure out why you're here and why this time, why this particular technological time. You may think you're a perennial English major and think that poetry is why you're here. And it could be one of the reasons you're here. But if you're living in a technological era whereby you're taking advantage of all sorts of fast movie downloads and cool technology like what we're speaking on right now, that you need to learn something about it. Maybe not everything, just something, so you understand what its power source is, how the power is being manipulated, possibly, particularly if you have headaches and nausea and things happening to you out of nowhere. Those reasons, because we are using the air now as a means of communication. So that's what happened to me. I started talking with Clifford, and he began to tell me what he was finding. He was doing all sorts of experiments with the atmosphere and figured out with his, for example, with a Van de Graaff generator, figured out that the atmosphere was being changed. Well, it wasn't just being changed by nature, it was being changed by human beings somewhere. That was his assumption. So he began to collect detritus that was coming from jets in the upper atmosphere over northern New Mexico where he lived, and then he would put it under the microscope perhaps, or add a solution in order to see what the reaction was, he could tell already that what we used to call contrails were not any more contrails in general. They were chemical trails because they had a chemical signature. And so he began with the atmosphere, but eventually found biological materials in what was coming down. And that's what led him to examine what that was. He found erythrocytes, he found red blood cells, he found pieces of meat coming down, can't figure out what it was from. And eventually he realized that there was geoengineering going on. In other words, geo meaning earth, engineering, yes. Bioengineering was also going on, and it was coming down with chemicals and particles that were coming from the jet. It looked like it was coming from the backs of the jets, but eventually he discovered it was actually coming from the wings as well. So the first step of a scientist is doubt and observation. And then the second step is a hypothesis that there was something possibly military going on because a lot of these jets, he would see like C-130s and that sort of thing. But it was also passenger jets. It seemed to be coming out of passenger jets. How could he tell the difference between the contrail and the chemtrail? Well, the contrail is a water vapor and ice crystals primarily, and it lasts maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute at the very most. But these chemical signatures coming out of the aft of the jets and out of wing portals that seem to be coming from the wings were actually different from anything, it was chemicals, and he detected barium, strontium, aluminum, the usual suspects that we all have heard somebody talk about in the last 20 years, those of us who are old enough. And he was experimenting with them, and then he discovered that there was something in the biologicals that was, when he put it under the slide with a speck of dust of blood from his body, that it was sucking the iron out of his red blood cells. So that's kind of where I came in and sort of woke up. I wasn't at that point that interested in technology of these jets and the jet engines and all that. I had to study all that. But I was very captured by the biological inference that there was something had been changed in the biology so that there was some entity that was sucking the iron out of people's red blood cells. So we collected saliva from people and examined it. And yes, there were definite fibers in there, filaments that had, he finally figured out how to chemically open the fibers, and he therein saw different organs, what he assumed were organs. And this was the famous Morgellons. Now, the term Morgellons is completely, it's kind of like that term the CIA really likes, the conspiracy theory. It was inappropriate because this was not the 17th century disease of the skin that people had that long ago, but they plucked that out of history. And because you would eventually, if you got this into your system, like by breathing it, because these filaments are very tiny, they're nanoscale. Nano is 1 billionth of a meter. They were able to, he was able to take that and break it open chemically and begin to examine the organs that he found in that. I first wrote about that in the very first book I wrote in 2014, Chemtrails, HAARP, and the Full Spectrum Dominance of Planet Earth. So from that point on, he would take these organs and figure out where they were at in the basically the three domains we now call them. We used to call them kingdoms, but they are now domains. And he figured out that all three domains were involved in what was inside these fibers. These were the same fibers that were being found, by the way. I mean, we both know Harald Kautz. Harald was one of his first jobs when he was studying these chemical trails was in Europe, where he was collecting fibers and filaments from like spider webs, quote unquote. They weren't really spider webs, but had a web stickiness to them, very similar. And he too was finding that these fibers uh, were the same thing in a sense as the Morgellons. And that was really the beginning of Clifford, yes, still concentrating on what was going on with the atmosphere. And, you know, I want to cover some of that I'll start out with, as long as I'm talking and not showing pictures, let me talk about those fibers, because that was really the very first thing that happened. Uh, and led to Clifford to see that not only was the atmosphere being changed by these chemicals and nanoparticles, which is also what he found, because that was pretty early in the game. Nanoparticles, we've had nanotechnology that's being made in factories and is in just about everything you can possibly think of that's kept technical now since the 70s. But we didn't know it. It was all kept very hush hush because truthfully, it was national security. And of course, the military is always interested in anything that bespeaks weaponizing. And the nanotech was already being used with the idea in mind uh, of a weapon to affect human beings, maybe not kill them, but infect them with various nanotechnology means in order to weaken the enemy. And of course, in America, they were experimenting on Americans, but quietly. So Americans didn't really know that. And so one of the things that we should know, and I always repeat this, you may wonder how they can have all these laws about not doing anything weaponized against human beings, and yet this chemtrails program that I write about, Project Cloverleaf, that's the one that I chose to write about, is they're constantly dropping things from the sky. It could be airplanes. It could be said to be weather modification, but it really is something else. But you're going to have to collect it. You're going to have to separate it from other pollutive agents, and you're going to have to uh, do a whole bunch of experimentation that probably you're not going to have the money for, because most of the money for this kind of experimentation belongs to the military. So they depend on what is called 50 U.S. Code 1520A in America, restrictions on use of human subjects for testing of chemical or biological agents. Well, it sounds really good on paper, because it sounds like you can't test things on people without their consent. But once you begin to read down a little bit, you see that there are a few exceptions. And one of the exceptions is any peaceful purpose that is related to a medical, comma, therapeutic, comma, pharmaceutical, comma, agricultural, comma, industrial, comma, or research activity. Oh, that's a small category. It includes just about everything that we use technology for. And that is a peaceful purpose. You're just looking. It's just research, and that's why they called HAARP, the famous acronym for the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Project, up in Gakona, Alaska, the ionospheric heater up there that's so powerful, so powerful. They called it a research project. They knew it was a weapon system, but of course, you can't talk about that in America because we have the National Security Act of 1947. Everything goes into private quarters when you begin to talk about anything that has to do with national security. So nobody knew about HAARP for a long time until Nick Begich and Gene Manning wrote Angels Don't Play This HAARP in 1994. That was the first book I read on it. And by the time I met Clifford, I had already gone through the book a couple of times and was quite familiar with how the ionospheric heaters worked according to what Nick had to say. So, some of this past that now in America anyway, and recently the UK has begun to be more public about geoengineering and talking about uh, running experiments with the sun. The same thing is going on here. There's been absolute silence for 2 decades about this program and the harm it's doing to people's health. But it's all been kept very quiet. I learned several years ago, it wasn't in the 90s, I think it was the early 2000s, that the EU-US Open Skies Agreement requires that NATO nations designate 15% of their budgets for chemical trails. So that's been going on a long time since the Open Skies Agreement in the 90s. And every NATO member, if you are to be a NATO member, you must sign on the dotted line to give 15% of your national income to feed the particulates that are being dropped from the sky. What is the purpose of those? Um, they they have to do with transmissions of information, definitely, because if you just had a vacuum up in the sky and you didn't have particulates, you would not be able to do really solid communiques. And they certainly knew because they are involved in several programs, one being the most famous and strange one. I want to read the top of that to you. Um, the most famous part is that it is the part where they're trying to get an ability to go beyond the Earth's atmosphere, which they have not really done, is how I see it. I know there are stories of various important scientists at NASA uh, who have claimed that we have done this, that, and the other, including the moonshot in '69. But the truth is that the radiation belts around the Earth are a deterrent to getting human beings as human beings are now beyond the radiation. They would have to wear lead-lined suits, and that is not being done. It's too heavy. It wouldn't work. So that is one of the reasons for this great transhuman thrust that we are undergoing now. And when Clifford and I started, I don't think we really thought about transhumanism. Uh, we definitely thought about people's health and thought about how the military didn't care about it. But once we discovered certain things about the Morgellons, which was actually the first synthetic biology species that he realized before me, of course, that was synthetic and was dependent, seemed to be dependent upon iron coming from human blood. Uh, we realized that this looked like an assault on humanity and was not simply using people as experimental subjects, but actually had an agenda for undermining human beings. And certainly, with all the collection I had done for a series of books that don't have anything to do with geoengineering, it's called Sub Rosa America. It's 4 books that are all one story that I wrote. It's in a fictional format, but it's pretty much the history, the sub rosa history, sub rosa meaning hidden, history of the United States. Therein, I very much reveal many of the technologies were really for uh, undermining first the immune system of the human being, and then eventually replacing the human being, this Homo sapiens, with another model of humanity that would easily be able to get through the Van Allen belts and survive in space and be able to talk to aliens or entities, AIs that had to speak with them, so that early on became a possibility. Not to say that it was proven. Of course, scientists like Clifford are very picky about not being ascribed uh, ideas that they have not really experimented with. But we after the saliva and seeing the fibers, the same sort of fibers that were agriculturally being found, uh, we went on to blood and collecting small amounts of blood from people in order to look at it under the microscope. And the microscope was not that powerful. But as I show in my slideshow, if I get that far, uh, I've been a member of a group in coming out of Australia of microscopists, and we've been looking at live blood for 2 years now, maybe 3, and seeing what is in the blood, which really should not be there. It's not a matter of your blood is lapping up environmental things. It's again, and most people don't know this, Miles. There are This is a two-pronged assault. I eventually realized after, I've written 5 books on geoengineering, and the last 2 are primarily on geoengineering and its impact on the synthetic biology that is going on now, that's taking the place of our interior of our bodies, and this is all being done as I speak. And some of it has been able that we've been able to find it in the blood by extremely excellent microscopes that are very expensive, that can get down to the nitty gritty of the what I call the tiny world, where we're having to really look at microbes now, and bacteria. So this shift from what would be called maybe by a biologist an epigenetic approach of the one prong coming from space and using air to aerosols to bring down onto the earth. And given that we all breathe from the same envelope of air on the entire planet with lots of different winds and eddies of air going through the planet, we all now are imbibing what is being dropped according to these trails. And the trails are the chemicals provided in the trails, needless to say, are provided by Big Pharma. And we just recently had a 4 to 5 year uh, interaction with Big Pharma in the inoculations that happened, the CV-19. These inoculations are the other prong. So you have the one coming, that's 20 years, all the way back to Monsanto and the beginning of GMO foods, genetically modified foods, which was really in the 30s. I thought it was in the 60s. And I found out, no, we've had GMO fields since the 30s, and that was under Monsanto, which now belongs to Bayer. And really, it's really extraordinary that I think Monsanto recently is has been suing uh, the regarding the chemtrails. They have admitted that they are what is in the chemtrails is also in the spraying done for GMO foods and the patents that Monsanto originated many years ago. So there's already a correlation, but because it was not talked about, geoengineering was not talked about, certainly this aspect of the serums that people were vaccinated with having all manner of strange items in it, that these photographs, and there is a book that has just come out, and I want you to know about it, is this by one of the microscopists in the group. It's called Nano Microscopy Investigations. And the pictures in the book are extraordinary. And they have captions so that you know primarily what it is thought of as in the picture. And it's
What's the
phenomenal.
publisher? Where would they get that?
They would get that at unhackable-animal.com. Unhackable. And they the author has,
And what's an author's name, just to give it to
well,
Devise's books?
she wants to be called the unhackable animal. That's what she wants to be called. But she is one of about a dozen, maybe going on 2 dozen people who have their photographs in this book in order for you to see what the blood is now beset by. You know, it's very quietly done, and some of them are unbelievable. Many crystals, uh, crystals, of course, being very good for communications. Transformation going on, self-assembly of synthetic biological creatures, and I mean, I think that their end goal for the transhuman hybrids, that would be us, who are human, but because it's much more than just a vaccine program of 4 years. They have the entire program of what's been going on in the sky
If you
now
could
for,
hold this a little bit higher, but I'm just missing the very bottom. Great, that's excellent. And while we're talking about books, there's this one, which is the Pfizer papers by with Naomi Wolf. The stuff on that is a nightmare. Lots of
yes,
photographs of what we're talking about here. Okay.
great. Great, Mouse. So, at last, my most recent book is this one, which is out by Inner Traditions, and now I have submitted the fifth manuscript, and I promise you, I will not write another book on geoengineering, though Clifford Carnicom and I are doing a biographical book of his to tell the story of what it's like to be completely silenced for 20 years, going on 30, so that people think only of climate change. The other cover story, uh, what's that one that has to do with global warming
The
and
CO2
how
thing. Yeah.
the CO2 thing, all of it.
This is an
Uh,
enemy of organic life. And while we're talking
he,
about that, I have a completely independent source
yeah,
that in
yeah.
Britain they were developing programmable generated life forms for, quote, the lunar base. That's here in Britain. And that's years ago,
Years ago.
decades ago.
Exactly. I think that's the main thing, is to see how powerful it is. In America, I can speak for you have the Official Secrets Act. We have the National Security Act of 1947, the year I was born in, actually. And that is the key to understanding how they can keep this silent all these years. People think, oh, you can't keep a you can't keep a secret like that. Oh, yes, you can. With disinformation, with lies, subterfuge, cover stories, CIA shenanigans, deaths, uh, uh, all kinds of things that have happened in these years to make sure that Americans who are paying for a lot of this having to do with the HAARP technology, so they don't know what they're paying for, that it's actually a weapon system. So there were some people I just wanted to. I know you probably, Miles, knew these people. Rosalind Peterson, she was one. She was a former crop inspector for USDA. She knew about this. That was back in 2007. She was invited by the UN to speak about the fact that the soil was being depleted, and so that was the first was the geographic that was going on.
Just on the
Uh,
UK side, there's a guy called Graham Harvey. He published several books. He was an author, of a scriptwriter for a BBC soap opera. He explained that they were demineralizing since the war, or
yeah.
they were deliberately demineralizing the food baskets of the world.
Yes, yes. So the agriculture and the geographic were the first. Then Michael J. Murphy did three films. What in the world are they spraying in 2010? Why in the world are they spraying in 2012? And then his third film was unfinished because he was killed before he could finish it. And that one was called An Unconventional Shade of Gray. And that one, Michael died on July 22, 2020. And the film has been brought out. I sent a copy. I was able to get a copy. It was almost finished. It lacked the captions, the subtitles that it needed. But I sent it to Greece, and they did a full public showing there. It's the only one I know of that has ever happened for that third film. And the third film is very good for what's there.
Well, we just
Everything
lost
is there.
another brilliant woman called Dusky Edwards. She got married, and she knew all about a lot of what was in these bases here in England. And she had her wedding 10 days ago. And just as the wedding finished and the formalities happened, she had a stroke and died 36 hours later.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's just
Gosh.
happened here. Yeah.
Well, and you know, it's like if you can't, the way we've dealt with it so far, if you can't prove it in a court of law, and we all, at least in America, you can't really trust many courts of law,
Shocking.
uh, then you're silent about these things, these deaths that are they're very suspicious. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping to help with. I have a huge file on just the geoengineering people who've been offed, and I want to be able to publish that under some form, possibly get a little bit into Clifford's book because Clifford certainly has been assaulted many times. So Billy Hayes was someone that helped me to write that book you held up, Under an Ionized Sky. Without Billy, I wouldn't have been able to write that book as well as I did because he explained to me what the space fence was, and that's a Lockheed Martin term. And he explained how they were using all these different types of technologies, including wind farms, including green energy,
Oh,
in
the
order
green
to.
energy is one of the biggest anti-human things there were, is.
Exactly, exactly. And that's Billy was he was an MK Ultra survivor. He had been in MK Ultra since he was 8 years old. His father was CIA, and he had been trained on programmed under MK Ultra to understand electromagnetics. And he was team leader for many of the 240 military units around the Earth when they were building HAARP-like ionospheric heaters. So Billy was invaluable to me. It got to where we were doing radio interviews a lot, but it got to where they were giving him grand mal seizures during the interviews, and so I stopped doing them with Billy because it was actually scaring the radio programmers. And Billy and I were close, you know. I miss him. Sasha Latipova recently and Catherine Watt are two wonderful ladies who have gone through legal documents and proven that the American military is in the business of vaccines as well. Have gone through masses of documents to expose the role of the U.S. military in the COVID-19 debacle, including Operation Warp Speed. So that gives you an idea of some of the people back then. Regarding the fibers, we had a marvelous chemist named Mike Castle, and he was able to uh, do many tests on the fibers being found in the fields and the fibers being found in the detritus coming down from the jets and the Morgellons people. What was in their blood? It was all these fibers with these different organs in them. And Mike, he said here, let's see, Michael Castle has specialized in environmental investigations and research of American, Canadian, and global air contamination operations, frequently referred to as chemtrails, lines in the sky, aerosol, heavy metals, particulates, other class poisons, toxins, etc. So this was back in the early 2000s. This was from 2003. So, you know, this we have been trying to be heard for all these years, and it's a matter of dealing with the National Security Act in America and the Official Secret Act, I would assume, in Britain. So, if I could start the just whip through the slide presentation. What do you think, Miles?
Yeah, but you got all the time in the world. It's all up to you.